One of the most dangerous and quite frankly disempowering things that can happen when someone is struggling with their health is when a diagnosis or the symptoms they're experiencing quietly become their reality. And most people don't even realize when that shift happens. I hear it from clients every single day. But it usually starts with one tiny word. And that one word slowly turns something that you're experiencing in your current reality into something that you believe you are. And that word is my migraines, my anxiety, my eczema, my gut issues, my allergies, my bad knee, my bad back. And on the surface, these statements, they seem totally harmless. But words matter. Every time we make that identity statement, something subtle is happening. We stop describing something we're experiencing in our current reality, and we start reinforcing something we believe we are. So the words that you repeat eventually become the identity that you live inside of. The way you talk about yourself, the way you think about your future, the actions you take, your behaviors, the way your nervous system responds to every little sensation in your body. And when that identity gets reinforced for long enough, it can keep you stuck right where you are, getting more of what you don't want. So in this episode, we're going to talk about how that happens, why identity and diagnosis can create powerful belief loops that just keep you stuck on this never-ending hamster wheel, and how you can begin separating who you are from what you are currently experiencing so that your body actually has room to move forward to what you want instead. Welcome to Rewired and Unstoppable. I'm Tamy Anderson, and this is where belief rewiring meets nervous system regulation, so you can create the health, success, happiness, and joy you want in every area of your life. Let's get into it. One of the first things I notice when I start working with clients is the way people talk about their symptoms. And again, I get it. It's normal language. I don't know if I want to use the word normal, but you know what I mean. But listen to how people say things like, my migraines, my IBS, my autoimmune condition, whatever that is, my chronic fatigue. And every time we repeat those phrases, something subtle is happening in the brain. When you attach the word my to something over and over and over again, your brain starts to categorize that thing as part of who you are, like it belongs to you. Not something you're just experiencing, something that you are. And that distinction matters far more than you probably realize. There's something really important that I want you to start paying attention to, and that's your words. Because your words matter more than most people realize, especially when it comes to your health. So when you say my anything, you're claiming ownership of that thing. My anxiety, my migraines, my autoimmune disease, my eczema, my allergies, my bad back, my acne, my whatever. And a really big one that I hear a lot is my MTHFR mutation. And what you claim, you reinforce. And what you reinforce, your nervous system learns to expect. Hey, quick pause from the show. If this episode is landing for you, if you're starting to notice how often your mind defaults to what's wrong, what's missing, what's broken, what's not working, what should be happening, that matters more than you probably realize. So we talk a lot about detoxing these days. Parasites, mold, heavy metals, candida, sugar, alcohol. And yes, I live in the functional medicine world. I run detoxes with my clients all the time. But there is one detox that impacts virtually every area of your life, your health, your relationships, your finances, your connection, your sense of safety in the world. And it's the one that most people never even consider. And it's often why all the other stuff doesn't stick long term. It's the detox of complaining, because that constant mental output keeps your nervous system stuck in stress. And when that happens, nothing truly changes long term. That's why I created the 2-week complaining detox challenge, to help you take this awareness and actually put it into practice in real time. So if you want to join us, you'll find it linked in the description below. All right, let's get back to the episode. And what your nervous system learns to expect is often what it keeps producing. So be really, really careful with your words, because when you claim something, you are telling your brain, this belongs to me. And what you claim, you get to keep. So be careful what you claim, because the mind tends to keep producing whatever identity you keep reinforcing. So here's a simple shift that I often suggest to my clients. Instead of attaching the symptom to your identity, describe it as something that you're experiencing right now. So instead of saying, my anxiety is so bad lately, you might say, I'm experiencing some anxiety today. Instead of, my migraines are killing me, you could say, I'm having a migraine today. Instead of saying, my eczema is horrible, you might say, I'm having an eczema flare right now. Do you hear the difference in those statements? One example attaches the symptom to who you are, and the other describes that it's just something that's happening in the moment. And that tiny little shift creates psychological and nervous system distance between you and the symptom that you're experiencing. And that distance really makes a lot of difference, because it reminds your brain this is an experience, not an identity. And experiences can change. And this is where identity becomes really, really incredibly important. Because once the mind locks onto an identity, even one that you don't want, the nervous system starts organizing around keeping that identity consistent, which is why people can try diet after diet, supplement protocol after supplement protocol, breath work and cold plunges and vagus nerve exercises and all the things. But if the underlying identity is still, I'm someone with chronic illness, the symptoms keep returning to that baseline, because that's the expectation. So if you've listened to some of my earlier episodes, you know that I dealt with chronic health issues for over 20 years. There were long periods of time where symptoms, controlled pretty much every aspect of my life. And it would have been really easy for me to let that become my identity. In fact, if I can be honest, it did become my identity for a really long time. I was the sick person. I was the person who was just susceptible to everything. I was the person with the complicated health situation that none of the doctors could figure out, right? But something inside of me hung on to hope, even when things were really hard. But there came a time when I realized that thinking wasn't really serving me. It was really keeping me a victim of my circumstances and disempowering me from being in control over my destiny, right? So I made a choice that I wasn't going to let that become who I was or remain who I was. And I want to talk about a place where I see a lot of people struggling with chronic health issues really start to take on the identity and claim the identity of whatever it is they're struggling with. And saying this is something that's probably going to ruffle a few feathers. Actually, it's probably going to ruffle a lot of feathers, but it needs to be said out loud, so I'm going to say it. And that is, if you are struggling with chronic health issues, staying the hell away from chronic illness Facebook groups is one of the best things that you can do for your nervous system and for preventing the symptoms that you're experiencing right now from becoming part of your identity. And I really say this with a lot of compassion because I do understand why people end up there. You're searching for solutions, you're searching for help, you're searching for validation. Dealing with a chronic health issue can become incredibly lonely and isolating. I've been there. I get it. You want the support. You want someone who understands. That's totally human. But what often ends up happening in those spaces is thousands of people, many of them really angry and bitter and frustrated, reinforcing the identity of illness, commiserating, comparing symptoms, talking about symptoms, analyzing symptoms, predicting future outcomes, right? And if you immerse yourself in that environment long enough, something subtle starts happening. The illness really becomes the center of your identity. I see this all the time with people, posting hashtags that revolve around their chronic illness. So your conversations end up revolving around it. Your expectations revolve around it. Your entire nervous system starts organizing around it. And this is a really, really personal topic to me because I watched it happen in real time in my own life. I watched my husband fall into this trap when he was dealing with chronic pain. And he had been given a diagnosis of X syndrome when doctors had no other answers and their treatments and surgeries and medications weren't successful, right? And honestly, I'm not even going to name the diagnosis he was given here because I don't want to give energy or acknowledgement to that label because I believe it was bogus. Doctors just didn't know how to investigate root cause or help him. So when none of their treatments were working, they just slapped a diagnosis on him. So after he received that diagnosis, he would go into these online forums looking for answers or support. And if I could be totally honest, confirmation that his condition was hopeless. So he would come away feeling hopeless. That's what he was looking for. Because all he saw was story after story after story of people saying the same thing. This is incurable. This is just something you're going to have to live with over time. This is just something you're going to have to learn to live with. It's called the suicide disease. And when you read enough of that, it starts shaping what you believe is possible. So my husband's diagnosis slowly became his identity. And it basically put horse blinders on him, making him unable to see other possible solutions that were put in front of them. So I see the same thing happen with clients all the time. Someone gets a diagnosis or they're dealing with certain symptoms and they just go looking for community. So they join Facebook groups for things like mold illness and histamine intolerance and mast cell activation syndrome and, all the things, right? And in theory, those groups, they're meant to help. I get it. But what often happens is information overload, conflicting advice, people giving guidance who haven't actually solved the problems themselves, right? And a lot of commiserating over symptoms, a lot of anger, a lot of blame, a lot of bitterness, a lot of reinforcement of the belief that this is just permanent. And when your nervous system is swimming in that environment every single day, it becomes really hard to imagine a different outcome. One of the questions I actually ask on my application form for potential clients is, do you believe that healing is possible for you? And that question matters. It matters a lot because the way someone answers tells me immediately where their mindset is around what they're experiencing with their health. I want you to really take this to heart because healing truly begins with believing that it is actually possible. My clients often come to me after years of circling the drain, trying to figure out what's going on. They've often seen dozens of doctors and practitioners of, all the types, right? They've collected diagnoses or, in a lot of cases, they've been told that their labs are totally normal, which is not true in most cases. They've run expensive lab tests. They've taken tons of supplements. They've done a lot of different programs, including programs focused on the nervous system. And at some point, the diagnosis or the symptoms that they're experiencing become the explanation for everything, right? I can't do that because of my condition. Nothing works for me. My body just doesn't work the same way as everyone else's. I'm just one of those difficult cases. This is probably just going to be how it is for me, right? And those beliefs start shaping their behavior, which shapes physiology, which determines outcomes. And this is why one of the questions I ask on my application form for potential clients is, do you believe healing is possible for you? Because if someone truly believes that their condition defines them or is permanent, their nervous system is going to organize around that belief. And no protocol in the world is going to override that belief. But if someone believes that change is possible, that opens an entirely different physiologic pathway. Another thing that I want to talk about in this episode today is going to be swimming upstream, really going against the grain of what a lot of people are promoting and talking about in the health space these days. It's something that's really, really being sold to people, and I think people are being preyed on. So I'm going to share my really unpopular opinion about another trap that I see more and more people falling into. It's the freaking I need to get my DNA tested rabbit hole trap, whatever you want to call it. In most cases, spending several $100s on DNA testing to figure out what's supposedly wrong with your genes is a complete and freaking utter waste of money. And I know that's going to ruffle some feathers, and I know a lot of people don't agree with me on that, but I'm okay with that because I think I'm right. I know I'm right. Because for the love of all that is holy, it needs to be said out loud. There is a massive amount of marketing out there right now, a lot of bro marketers telling people that that decoding their DNA is going to be the magic bullet to fixing their health, and it's fucking not. And if you just understand your SNPs and your methylation pathways, your genetic predispositions, suddenly everything's going to make sense. Just take these supplements for the rest of your life, follow this protocol, right? And poof, everything's going to be fixed, and it's total bullshit. But let's step back for a second and ask just a really logical question. Where in human history did we ever need to understand our DNA sequence in order for the body to be healthy and to heal itself? Something that it is innately designed to do. We didn't. The body has been repairing and regenerating and adapting and healing for hundreds of thousands of years without anyone analyzing gene reports, right? And yet now we're supposed to believe that the only way forward, the only way to dig ourselves out of chronic health hell is to run a report that tells you what's genetically wrong with you? It's absolute fucking nonsense. And here's the actual truth. Genetics may load the gun. That part's true. But your lifestyle, and probably even more importantly, your thoughts, your mindset, the meaning that you're attaching to every experience in your life, that's what pulls the freaking trigger. And when people run these DNA reports The story they walk away with is usually the exact opposite. They start believing that their genes are the problem, that their body is just genetically broken, that their health is predetermined. And once that belief gets installed, guess what happens in the nervous system? It starts organizing around the identity of being defective. And like I said a minute ago, in the large majority of cases, genetic testing is not only completely unnecessary, but a frustrating and dead-end rabbit hole. And I see the fallout with this from my clients all the time. People come to me so freaking frustrated because they've already invested a ton of money and a ton of time and a ton of faith, right, into the idea that their DNA report is going to hold the magic answer, that it's going to be the magic bullet. So they get this long report, pages and pages of genetic SNPs, a list of supplements that they're supposed to take. And the promise is that once they support their genes, everything's going to fall into place. Except that's almost never what happens. Because now they're walking around believing that their body is genetically broken and their genes are the problem. Right? I mean, I actually believed this for years when I was dealing with chronic health issues. You know, I thought that my genetics just sucked. That's the story that I was telling myself. And thank God genetic testing wasn't available back then, because I easily would have been sucked down that rabbit hole. And, you know, I was just so desperate. And that's the problem. These companies are preying on people's desperateness. And once that belief gets installed, guess what happens to the nervous system? It starts organizing around the identity of being defective. And when the nervous system believes that the body's defective, it stays stuck in survival mode, right? Which means that digestion suffers, your hormones suffer, your immune function suffers, you have increased inflammation, your energy crashes, you can't sleep at night, right? All the same symptoms that people are trying to fix. It all stays dysregulated. So the problem was never the genes. The problem was the identity that got reinforced around the genes. You know, functional medicine, a world that I live in, talks a lot about root causes. And that usually means lab testing, supplements, a bunch of protocols, some lifestyle changes, and those kinds of things, right? Detoxes. And those things, you know, they absolutely have their place. We work on all of these things in my practice. But one of the biggest root causes that I see over and over and over again is nervous system dysregulation. Because when the nervous system is stuck in survival, it throws everything else out of balance. Your hormones, your digestion, your immune function, your inflammatory markers, your energy, your sleep. And one of the fastest ways to keep the nervous system stuck in survival mode is reinforcing the identity of being sick. So, you know, a diagnosis can be useful information. It can help guide your investigation. It can help guide a plan or, you know, a roadmap to helping the body heal on its own. Something, by the way, that it is innately designed to do. And we've forgotten about that because we've got so many weird things shoved at us these days, right? Our world just isn't the natural habitat or environment that we evolved in. But it should never become who you are. You are not your diagnosis. You are not your lab results. You are not the symptoms your body is currently experiencing. And the moment that that identity begins to shift, your physiology often starts shifting too. So remember what I said earlier in this episode. What you claim, you get to keep. So choose your words wisely. So before we wrap up this episode today, I just want to say thank you. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. I know that this episode might have touched on some sensitive territory with some people. When you've been struggling with your health for a really long time, it's very, very easy for the symptoms or the diagnosis to start kind of feeling like a part of who you are. And talking about that can feel uncomfortable. But my intention in sharing this perspective isn't to dismiss anyone's experience. I've been there. Or to minimize what they're going through, right? It's the opposite. It's to remind you that what you're experiencing right now does not have to define who you are or what your future is going to look like. So if today's conversation gave you a new way of thinking about your situation, or if it helped you to see something differently, I'd love for you to share this episode with someone else who might need to hear it too. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, leaving a rating or review really helps to get this information out to more people who need it. You can also follow the show so that new episodes are going to land right in your feed every single week. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you're subscribed and drop me a comment. I love to read them. I try to read all of them. I love hearing what lands for you in the episode. And if you're ready to go deeper with this work, I've got a few resources linked down below for you in the description. My Complaining Detox Challenge is honestly one of the simplest and most eye-opening places that you can start. It's a simple 2-week challenge designed to help you become more aware of how often you're complaining, probably in ways you don't even realize, and start interrupting that in real time. Because when you're focused on what's wrong, what's not working, what you don't want, your nervous system stays stuck in stress. And you just keep getting more of that stuff, right? The challenge helps you shift that focus, regulate your nervous system, and start responding to life differently. I've also got my Rewired for Healing EFT tapping program linked down there. One of the biggest things I see keeping people stuck isn't just what they're doing. It's the subconscious gunk that's running in the background all day long. And tapping is one of the fastest and easiest ways to start shifting that gunk. It doesn't take hours. You don't have to dig up tough things from your past or make it this heavy emotional process. You can do this in just a few minutes a day and start creating real, tangible changes in how you think, how you feel, and how your body responds. It's a really simple and powerful way to start rewiring your brain in a way that helps you actually create the life that you want. There's also a link to my free masterclass down there in the description where I show you why a real root cause approach isn't just about the lifestyle changes, your gut, detox, or supplements, but your nervous system has to be part of it and how those pieces actually work together if you feel stuck with your health and what actually needs to shift if you want to see real progress. And if you're in that place where you're just like, okay, I am done trying to figure this out on my own, you can use the link in the description to apply for a freedom call, and we'll see if working together makes sense. Again, thank you so much for being here with me today. I appreciate you more than you know. I love you. I mean it. And I'll see you in the next episode.